I'm Charlie Sonnier, and this is the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. Still in its infancy in the early 1920s, the NHL longed for marquee attractions to fill its arenas. In 1922-23, two men pushed their way to the forefront. One, Clint Benedict, would stop the puck better than any of his contemporaries, while the other, Babe Dye, would fire it better than anyone else. Benedict's career spanned 18 years, during which he won 3 Stanley Cups with the Ottawa Senators and 1 with the Montreal Maroons. In addition, he forced a rewrite of the rulebook. During the World War I era, goaltenders were penalized for dropping to the ice to make a save. Benedict defied the rule and received so many penalties that officials deleted it. Thereafter, puck blocking from any angle, including the ice level, was allowed. After Ottawa moved into the NHL, Benedict led the Senators to cup wins in 1920, 21, and 23. The 22-23 season in particular showed Benedict at his best. He paced Ottawa to a first-place finish in the NHL's regular season. In the NHL playoffs, he outdueled Canadiens goalie George Vezina, winning 2-game total goal series 3-2. Best of 3 Stanley Cup finals, Benedict bested Edmonton 2-1 and 1-0. Statistically, Benedict outshined the more famous Vezina. Both played regularly from 1917-1918 through 1924-25, but Benedict had a 3.01 goals against and 21 shutouts during that time, while Vezina posted a 3.35 goals against mark and 13 shutouts. Benedict was also the first major league goalie to wear facial protection in 1929-30. While playing for the Maroons, Benedict was struck in the face by a Howie Morenz shot. He then donned a leather mask in a game to protect his broken nose. Benedict's ascent in goal was matched on offense by power shooter from Toronto. Babe Dye could shoot the puck faster than anyone who'd preceded him on the NHL stage. Babe played much bigger than his 5'8", 150-pound frame, and his dashing good looks merely added to his charisma. Dye made his NHL debut in 1919-1920 with Toronto St. Patrick's. As a rookie, he made an unfavorable impression on teammates with his cockiness, and his playing time was limited. But Dye busted out of the gate as a sophomore, leading the league with 35 goals. He finished second in red lights in 1921-22 with 30 and added a whopping 9 tallies in the 1922 playoffs. In 1922-23, Dye led the NHL in scoring for the first time. Playing in 22 games, Dye recorded 26 goals and 11 assists for 37 points, 6 more than runner-up Cy Dennehy. Although he was not known for his dynamic speed, Dye compensated with extraordinary stick-handling ability and a wrist shot. There were no slap shots in those days, of extraordinary speed. The 1-2 combination of the spectacular goalie and the galvanic shooter helped the NHL spread the hockey gospel even further. The glamour of the game was becoming as important as its more prosaic elements, and for that, the owners could thank Benedict and Dye. Newsy Lalonde's feud with the bosses in Montreal resulted in his exile to Saskatoon of the WCHL for diminutive Aurel Joliat, a future Hall of Famer. Joe Malone, his career on the downswing, is traded by Hamilton to Montreal for Bert Corbrew and Edward Bouchard. Not about to stand pat after the Stanley Cup title run, the St. Pat's shipped Corbett Dennehy to Vancouver for playoff scoring hero Jack Adams in the first interleague transaction. For the first time ever, the unique sounds of NHL hockey are broadcast live over the radio airwaves. Foster Hewitt, sitting in a glass booth at Toronto's Mutual Street Arena, does the play-by-play. On opening night, Toronto's Babe Dye, the playoff scoring champ of the previous year, picks up where he left off with a 5-goal game against Montreal's George Vezina. The Ottawa Senators, whose top lines feature Cy Dennehy, Frank Niewar, and Punch Broadbent, win the regular season title with 14 wins. They go undefeated at home. Clint Benedict, Ottawa's puck stopper extraordinaire, wins his 5th straight goals against title with a 2.25 mark. Babe Dye, the dynamic St. Pat's scorer, leads the NHL in goals with 26 and points overall with 37. Billy Boucher, Montreal's scrappy right winger, is second in the NHL in goals with 23, 4th in points with 27, and 1st in penalty minutes with 52. Edward Bouchard of Hamilton leads the NHL in assists with 12, but his Tigers win just 6 times. Ottawa wins its 2-game total goal playoff matchup with the Canadiens. The Senators outscore the Habs 3-2. Montreal owner Leo Danderond suspends Sprague Cleghorn and Billy Couture before Game 2 of the playoffs as a result of their attacks on Ottawa players in Game 1. As a player coach in Saskatoon, Newsy Lalonde leads the WCHL in scoring, but his club finishes in last place. Edmonton wins the regular season WCHL title and dispatches Regina in the playoffs. The PCHA adopts a 6-man format, eliminating the Rover. Victorious Frank Frederickson leads the PCHA in scoring with 41 goals. The newly renamed Vancouver Maroons defeat Seattle yet again in the PCHA playoffs. Vancouver next faces Ottawa in another round of playoffs. Ottawa nips Vancouver in Game 1 of their playoff matchup 1-0 as Punch Broadbent scores the game winner. However, Vancouver wins Game 2 4-1 as the Senators suffer injuries to Clint Benedict, Eddie Girard, and Cy Dennehy. The Senators recover from their injuries and reform their attack. They dispatch the upstart Maroons with victories in the next two games, 3-2 and 5-1, to take the best-of-5 series 3-1. The Senators next face Edmonton for the Stanley Cup. The finals are switched to a best-of-3 format. Ottawa wins Game 1 of the finals 2-1 as Cy Dennehy beats Eskimo goalie Hal Winkler in overtime. In Game 2, Punch Broadbent scores the only goal of the game to clinch the Stanley Cup for the Senators. Ottawa's Clint Benedict has a goals against of 1.30 in postseason play. He surrenders just 10 goals in 8 games. Although he had no royal blood in his veins, Gordon Duke Keats was the king of Edmonton during the 1922-23 season. Keats joined the Eskimos in 1921-22, their inaugural year in the WCHL, and was promptly named team captain. In 1922-23, he led the league with 24 goals, directed the Eskimos to the WCHL title, and helped them win a spot in the Stanley Cup Finals. There, they managed just 1 goal against Ottawa and lost in 2 games. The fame of Foster Hewitt spanned more than 50 years. He was a rank amateur on the ice, but in the broadcast booth, he was the unrivaled champion of the rink. On March 22, 1923, Hewitt called the play-by-play for one of the first hockey broadcasts ever at Toronto's Mutual Street Arena. He would go on to broadcast thousands of games and would remain in the radio business until 1981. A disciplined, intelligent hockey player, Frank Fredrickson was the PCHA scoring leader in the 1922-23 with 41 goals. The big Icelander first caught people's attention in 1920 when he led his amateur Winnipeg Falcons team to the Olympic gold medal. Playing for Lester Patrick's Victoria Cougars in 1925, Fredrickson won the Stanley Cup. Through its formative years, organized hockey had become notorious for its robust, often vicious quality. One reason for this was the frontier spirit in Western Canada. Hockey sprouted in dozens of rough-and-tumble prairie towns where lawlessness was as common as the autumn frost. As a result, bloodshed on ice was not uncommon, and some of the early stars, such as Bad Joe Hall and Sprague Cleghorn, were so renowned for their wood chopping as they were for their scoring prowess. It wasn't until the post-World War I era that a scintillatingly clean player made a big impact. The skater in question was Frank Dutch Nieboer, a native of Pembroke, Ontario, who cut his puck teeth with the Toronto Arenas of the NHA and Vancouver Millionaires of the PCHA. Nieboer achieved genuine stardom when he signed with the Ottawa Senators. He was a great checker, either poking the puck from an opponent's stick as he came head-on or hooking it from it as he attempted to go by. Nieboer had spliced an additional 8 inches to the handle of his stick, giving him a terrific reach in poking or hooking the puck. And it was perfectly legal because the rules specified only that sticks must not exceed 3 inches in the width at any point, making no reference to its length. Nieboer was far from a wimp. It was just that he was militantly refused to be suckered into fighting. Nobody was more scarred about the face than Frank Nieboer. Newsy Lalonde would rip his stick into Nieboer's face, yet I don't recall him ever hitting him back. Turning the other cheek did not hinder Nieboer's production. In 1923-24, Dr. David A. Hart presented the Hart Trophy to the NHL for the league's most valuable player. Nieboer won the trophy, edging out his less discreet foe, Cleghorn. The Senators became known as the Super Six, with Nieboer centering Cy Dennehy and either Jack Dar or Harry Broadbent. In that role, as one critic noted, Nieboer became the NHL's best all-around player. According to the Trail of Stanley Cup, it was hard for his admirers to make up their minds at which he was best, offense or defense. Nieboer's extraordinarily clean play, combined with superior skills, eventually caught the eye of Lady Byng, wife of Canada's Governor-General, who frequented Senators games in Ottawa. Lady Byng was so taken by Nieboer's exemplary play that she decided to present a trophy to the player judged to have exhibited the best type of sportsmanship and gentlemanly conduct combined with a high standard of playing ability. Nieboer won the first Lady Byng trophy in 1924-25 and took it again in 25-26. The prestige of the trophy and the lofty status of Nieboer grew new dignity to cleanly played hockey. After the Cleghorn Couture episode of the previous year, the NHL redefines actionable match fouls, assesses new fines, and mandates presidential review for possible further punishment. The game's first individual trophy is introduced when Dr. David Hart, father of Canadian coach Cecil Hart, dedicates the Hart Trophy for the NHL's most valuable player. The Ottawa Senators take the regular season title with 16 wins. Cy Dennehy, the Senators' veteran left winger, snaps home a league-high 22 goals in 21 games and wins the scoring title with 23 points. Ottawa's George Boucher's 19 points are tops among NHL backliners. George Vezina, playing in his 7th season with Montreal, wins his first goals against title with a near microscopic mark of 2.0. Despite finishing with just 13 points, 10 goals among them, Ottawa's Frank Nieboer is voted the league's most valuable player. and is the first recipient of the Hart Trophy. Early in the year, the Canadian Sprague Cleghorn sits out a one-game suspension after deliberately injuring Ottawa's Cy Dennehy and Lyle Hitchman in separate incidents. In the WCHL, Saskatoon's Bill Cook, a future NHL star, scores 26 goals and wins the scoring title. Calgary wins the four-team race for regular season honors in the WCHL. The Allen Cup champion Toronto Granites represented Canada in the 1924 Winter Olympics, and boy did they put on a show. In its 5 games, Canada slaughtered Switzerland 33-0, Czechoslovakia 30-0, Sweden 22-0, Great Britain 19-2, and the U.S. 6-1. Frank Rankin led the assault with 30 goals. Cy Dennehy, the veteran leader of the Ottawa Senators, captured the NHL scoring title in 1923-24, tallying 22 goals and 1 assist. Dennehy appeared in only 21 games during the season because he was speared by Canadians defenseman Sprague Cleghorn. Although it was suggested that Cleghorn was going out of his way to deliberately injure Ottawa players, the NHL decided not to suspend him. When Mickey McKay signed on professional hockey player in 1914, it was with the PCHA's Vancouver Millionaires. He exceeded all expectations and topped all goal scorers in the loop with 34 goals in only 17 games. In 1923-24, McKay again led the PCHA in goals with 23 markers. Nicknamed Wee Scott, McKay was a charismatic player who befuddled goalies with his quick breakaways and in-close shooting ability. Regina finishes second in the WCHL and will face Calgary in a 2-game total goals playoff. Mickey McKay, the Vancouver Maroons' top producer, wins the PCHA scoring title on the strength of his 23 goals. The Maroons finish second and will take on regular season champion Seattle for PCHA bragging rights. After Montreal beats Ottawa in the NHL playoffs, Habs owner Leo Danderond proclaims his team defender of the Stanley Cup. Leo Danderond further insists that the 2 Western Leagues stage a playoff, the winner to face his Habs for the Cup. He will not get his way, as all 3 league champions will go at it in the playoffs. In the first stage of the playoffs, Calgary defeats Regina for the WCHL title. Meanwhile, Vancouver dispatches Seattle to win the PCHL crown. In the first stage of the playoffs, Calgary defeats Regina for the WCHL title. Meanwhile, Vancouver dispatches Seattle to win the PCHA crown. In second stage of the playoffs, Calgary and Vancouver face each other, with Calgary winning and earning a bye in the upcoming NHL portion of the playoffs. The Vancouver Maroons are no match for the Montreal Canadiens, losing the semifinals in 2 games, 3-2 and 2-1. The Canadiens crushed Calgary in the finals, beating them 6-1 in the opening game on the strength of a Howie Moran's hat trick. For the second straight Olympics, Canada wins the hockey gold, and the U.S. takes the silver. It wasn't easy at first, but the NHL survived its early growing pains, and by the 7th season, it had attracted the attention of several American promoters. U.S. hockey already had proven a big hit on an amateur level and at the universities, and the United States already had its first legend, Hobey Baker. Baker had starred for Princeton University before losing his life in a post-World War I plane crash. By the early 1920s, Bostonians had taken hockey to their hearts, and it was only a matter of time before some cash baron decided to buy an NHL franchise and bring it to Beantown. The lucky tycoon was Charles F. Adams, a New England grocery magnate who watched the 1924 Stanley Cup playoffs in Montreal and came away convinced that big league hockey couldn't miss in the United States. After my dad went to Montreal, he was sold on the NHL, said his son Weston Adams Jr., who later became Bruins president. When he returned home, he told us this was the greatest hockey he had ever seen. He wouldn't be happy until he had a franchise. It was Montreal that got us started. Adams was supported by sportsmen Tom Duggan, Frank Sullivan, and Russ Layton. After being granted a new NHL franchise for Boston, Adams enlisted the aid of Arthur Ross, a star defenseman with Ottawa and the Montreal Wanderers in the old NHA. Immediately after his arrival in Boston, Ross went about the business of signing players for the new club. On December 1, 1924, the Boston Bruins became the first U.S. team to skate in the NHL. Other potential American entries closely watched the birth and growth of the Bruins. Artistically, the Bruins were hardly encouraging, as their goalies, led by Charlie Stewart, couldn't guard against an onslaught of shots. Offensively, little-known Jimmy Herberts led the meager attack with just 22 points. Boston opened with a win over the Montreal Maroons, the year's other expansion team, and then proceeded to lose 11 consecutive games. The expansion Bruins struggled greatly, finishing the season at 6-24-0, 8 points behind the rookie Maroons. Boston scored just 49 goals and gave up 119. The club featured future stars like Lionel Hitchman and past stars like Al Skinner, but no present stars. We had 3 teams that year, said Weston Adams Jr., 1 coming, 1 going, and 1 playing. Even though the Bruins won only 6 games, they had won the hearts of Boston. The NHL's American experiment turned out to be a roaring success. Charles Adams was besieged with calls from other U.S.-based promoters, and soon applications poured in from other American cities. With the completion of New York's Madison Square Garden, a bid came from a Manhattan-based syndicate while another was received from Pittsburgh. Unquestionably, hockey in the USA was here to stay, and the NHL's first great expansion boom was just around the corner. In 1924-25, the NHL expanded from 4 teams to 6, adding the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Maroons. The Bruins had a color scheme of brown and yellow because owner Charles F. Adams owned the Brookside stores, whose colors were brown and yellow. Boston, managed by Art Ross and featuring many former World Hockey League players, went 6-24-0 in 1924-25. After 7 years of successful operation as a 4-team league, the NHL expands to 6 teams. Donat Raymond and Thomas Strachan are awarded the franchise in Montreal. The Maroons, the owners, immediately go after some big names to stock their lineup. Charles Adams pays the requisite $15,000 fee and takes control of the Boston Bruins. The Bruins become the first U.S. team in the NHL. The season is expanded from 24 games to 30, which will lead to player insurrection during the later stages of the campaign. A year after the Hart Trophy is introduced, the NHL adds the Lady Byng Trophy for sportsmanship and accomplishment. It is named for the wife of the Canadian Governor-General, Baron Byng. Longtime Toronto hero Reg Noble ends up in a Montreal Maroons jersey, as do former Ottawa goalie Clint Benedict and scoring ace Punch Broadbent. After 4 terrible seasons, Hamilton emerges to win 19 games and beat Toronto by 1 point in the regular season standings. On December 5, 1924, Red Green scores 5 of his 19 goals against Toronto's John Roach in a 10-3 Hamilton victory. On December 22, 1924, Toronto's Babe Dye victimizes Boston goalie Charlie Stewart for 5 goals as the St. Pat's roll to a 10-2 win. On January 7, 1925, Maroons right-wing Punch Broadbent beats Hamilton goalie Jake Forbes for 5 goals. Toronto's Babe Dye leads the NHL in both goals 38 and points 44. Governors General have a tradition of influencing Canada's favorite sports. The Stanley Cup and the Grey Cup were both donated by Governors General. Lady Byng, the wife of Governor-General Lord Byng, donated this fine trophy in 1924 to be given to the NHL player who best exhibited both sportsmanlike conduct and a high level of play. The first winner was Ottawa's Frank Niebor. In 1924-25, a team went on strike for the first time in the NHL. The Hamilton Tigers, led by Hart Trophy winner Billy Birch, 20 goals, finished in first place with a 19-10-1 record. However, they refused to participate in the playoffs without receiving their playoff pay they felt they were due. NHL President Frank Calder suspended the team and its players and awarded their playoff berth to third place Montreal. The Stanley Cup returned to Western Canada in 1925 for the first time in 10 years. The WCHL's Victoria Cougars shocked the Montreal Canadiens with a 3-1 triumph in the Stanley Cup showdown. In the decisive 4th game, Victoria's Frank Frederickson scored a pair of goals and Hap Holmes shut down the attack. Alex Connell, the Ottawa fireman, put out a few blazes for the Senators during the 24-25 season. Though just a rookie, the confident Connell set an NHL record with 7 shutouts while recording a splendid 2.20 goals against average. Brought in to replace the great Clint Benedict, Connell became an instant favorite among Ottawa fans for his acrobatic saves and genial personality. Though his team wins the regular season title, Hamilton's Red Green calls a wildcat strike, claiming his contract is for 24 games and insisting that he and his mates receive extra money for the playoffs. NHL President Frank Calder rejects Red Green's strike argument, suspends the entire Tiger Club. As significant as the Bruins' debut in Boston may have been, NHL barons understood that they would not really make it big in the U.S. until they scored on Broadway. Interestingly, the road to New York hockey began in Hamilton, Ontario, and it was driven by, of all people, a prohibition bootlegger. At the end of the 1924-25 season, Red Green of the Hamilton Tigers, complaining that the extension of the regular season from 24 to 30 games should include a pay raise, led the Tigers on a walkout. Unable to handle the situation in Hamilton, NHL President Frank Calder agreed on the sale of the team, its relocation to New York. Curiously, a Canadian-born newspaperman covering sports in New York City inspired Big Bill Dwyer to launch the Americans. William Macbeth, a sports writer from Windsor, Ontario, believed that if hockey could be properly staged in Manhattan, it would be an instant hit. Macbeth initially had his listeners and his backers, but he lacked one item, a major league arena. The city of New York did have one arena to house the sport, Madison Square Garden, which had been built in Manhattan in the early 1920s. The new garden wasn't perfectly suited for ice hockey since it was built primarily for prize fighting and lacked adequate sightlines for the Canadian game. However, the garden contained 15,000 seats and enough good ones to satisfy even the most discriminating fans. Still, the owners of Madison Square Garden weren't interested in buying an NHL franchise, so Macbeth had to go elsewhere for money. His choice was Dwyer, a character among characters in the era of the wonderful nonsense. A native New Yorker, the pot-bellied Dwyer grew up in the area around the New Garden, living the life of a quasi-dead-end kid. He did a short stretch in prison, bounced around the west side of Manhattan until Prohibition arrived. He became rich as a bootlegger and decided to invest his money in the New York Americans. The Americans ended up playing their games in Madison Square Garden. With Tommy Gorman as manager, the Amerks premiered in the Garden on December 15, 1925. In spite of the team's 3-1 loss to the Montreal Canadiens that night, owner Dwyer nonetheless broke out the champagne at the game's end. Billy Birch, with 22 goals in that first year, headed a roster that included such talent as Brother Shorty in red green and defenseman Alex McKinnon and Bullet Joe Simpson. The Americans finished their first season with a record of 12-20-4. Though they didn't make the playoffs, the Amerks had become a hit on Broadway. They so frequently filled Madison Square Garden that the arena owners decided that they too should own a hockey team. They applied for a second New York franchise, which would become the Rangers. Bringing the NHL to Broadway turned out to be one of the league's best moves. The Hamilton Tigers are purchased by reputed New York City bootlegger Big Bill Dwyer for $75,000. Renamed the New York Americans, the former Tigers are housed in Madison Square Garden, where they draw 17,000 fans for opening night. The NHL expands to 7 teams as the Pittsburgh Pirates join the party. Former Canadian star Odie Cleghorn serves as player and coach. Rule changes include delayed penalties to ensure 4 skaters on the ice at all times, no more than 2 players are allowed to remain behind the blue line after the puck leaves the defensive zone, and a face-off results from excessive puck ragging. The regular season schedule grows from 30 to 36 games. On December 26, 1925, the Americans and Pirates combined for a record 141 shots on goal. New York, with 73, wins the game 3-1. The Maroons fall to second place in their second NHL season. Maroons rookie Nell Stewart leads the league in goals with 34 and points with 42. He also wins the Hart Trophy. Boston sophomore Carson Cooper is second with 28 goals, though his Bruins, with Art Ross at the helm, finish no better than 4th. The Ottawa Senators, with a record of 24-8-4, capture their 6th regular season title. Alex Connell leads the NHL in wins with 24 and goals against 1.17, posting an unheard-of 15 shutouts. Alex Connell was not much of a hockey man early on. His athletic skills were varied, but mostly he was a baseball player. He played catcher in the Interprovincial League and was also a member of Ottawa's Eastern Canada Lacrosse Championship teams in the 20s. In 1925-26, his second season as Ottawa's first-string goalie, he registered an amazing 15 shutouts as well as a 1.17 goals against average. He won 24 of his 36 games. He was quite simply the finest rookie to ever lace up the blades in the NHL. Nels Old Poison Stewart joined the Montreal Maroons in 25-26 and led the entire league in both goals, 34, and scoring points, 42. He also won the Hart Trophy. With all guns blazing, Stewart led the Maroons charge through the playoffs, scoring 6 goals in 8 games as the Maroons knocked off the Pittsburgh, Ottawa, and Victoria to win the Stanley Cup. Stewart, a future Hall of Famer, would eventually become the first NHLer to score 300 goals. The demise of the NHL's Hamilton franchise gave rise to the second NHL team in the United States. The New York Americans emerged in 1925-26, and they played their games in the new Madison Square Garden. At the corner of Madison Square and 26th Street in the Big Apple, the Garden, which seated 13,000 for hockey, would also be the home of the NHL's Rangers beginning in 1926-27. Pittsburgh is surprisingly competitive in its inaugural campaign, finishing third. Pirates rookie Roy Waters finishes with a 1.94 goals against average and 7 shutouts. The NHL sees its first 100-minute penalty leader. Actually, 5 skaters finish above the century mark, led by Toronto's Bert Corbeau with 121. Ottawa's Frank Niebor leads the NHL in assists with 13 en route to his second Lady Byng Trophy. As regular season champs, the Senators earn a playoff bye. The second-place Maroons dispatch third-place Pittsburgh in a 2-game total goal series, 6-4. The Maroons shock heavily favored Ottawa in the NHL playoffs. Former Senators goalie Clint Benedict blanks his former mates 1-0 in Game 2. Montreal will face the WCHL champ in the Stanley Cup Finals. The Western Canada Hockey League is on its last legs. Regina moves to Portland, and Canada is dropped from the league title. This will be the league's final year. Edmonton takes the regular season WHL title but fails to reach the Stanley Cup Finals. Victoria, the third-place finisher, upsets Saskatoon and Edmonton for the right to defend the Cup title. The best-of-5 final features brilliant goaltending by Maroons' Clint Benedict, who records 3-0 shutouts in Game 1 and 2. In Game 3, Victoria's Frank Frederickson scores late to win it 3-2. Montreal clinches the Cup with a 2-0 victory in Game 4. Nell Stewart scores both goals and Clint Benedict notches his 4th playoff shutout. The disbanding of the PCHA and WCHL benefited many NHL teams, but none more so than the New York Rangers, a new team that joined the league in 1926-27. From the Western circuits, the Rangers obtained Frank Boucher and one of pro hockey's most famous brother acts, Bill and Bun Cook. Boucher, a center and protege of clean-playing Frank Niebor, was stick-handling marvel. Wrote Montreal hockey columnist Dink Carroll, he would take the puck away from the enemy with the guile and smoothness of a conman picking the pockets of yokels at a country fair, then whisk it past the enemy goaltender or slip it to Bill or Bun. Bill Cook, one of hockey's all-time best right wings, and Bun, a superior left wing, melded perfectly with Boucher. Bill, Bunny, and I clicked as a line from the beginning, said Boucher. We never put diagrams on paper. Somehow, just in describing our ideas, we'd all grasp it. Bill would do most of the talking. He'd say, now look, when I want that puck, I'll yell for it, and you get that damn puck to me when I yell. Don't look up and see where I am. Just put it there, and I'll be there. The drop pass, which became a standard NHL play, and is to this day, was invented by Bun Cook and executed by himself, Bill, and Boucher to perfection. As soon as Bunny crossed the other team's blue line, said Boucher, he faked a shot, drawing a defenseman to him, then he left the puck for me, coming in fast behind him. If the defenseman turned to cover Bun, I carried the puck on in. If he came for me, I slid it past him to Bun, circling behind, and if both defensemen came for us, leaving Bill open, I'd flip it pass across to him. They moved with the grace of figure skaters and passed the puck with radar-like accuracy. Bill was the crackerjack shot, Bun had the brawn, and Boucher had all the class in the world. The presence of the Troika in the lineup assured the expansion Rangers of box office success in a town that already had a popular team, the Americans. Because NHL clubs in that era maintained extremely small rosters, it was not uncommon for players to remain on the ice for up to 60 minutes a game. Thus, the Cooks and Boucher were able to weave their magic all night long. And while there had been innumerable set lines before, none came close to bewitching the public in the manner of this trio. Thanks to Boucher and the Cooks, the 1926-27 Rangers finished first in the American Division with a record of 25-13-6, an unheard-of achievement for an expansion team. Bill Cook led the NHL in scoring, 33-4-37, tallying 8 more goals than anyone else. Boucher and the Cooks formed the NHL's first power line, one that remained intact through the 1935-36 season. In the time, the trio played on 2 Stanley Cup winners in 27-28 and 32-33, and were acknowledged as one of the greatest and most durable triumvirates in hockey history. I'm Charlie Saunier from the Renegades of Puck, and this has been the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. If you'd like to support more projects like this, please follow the Renegades of Puck on all social media platforms and also visit renegadesofpuck.com.